The boardroom fell silent as Takeo Nakamura, the man they all thought was just a janitor, responded to the CEO's insult in flawless Japanese. What happened next would change the entire company forever. If you've ever been underestimated or overlooked, this story will resonate deep in your soul. Hit that like button and subscribe to see more incredible stories of everyday heroes who rise above the odds. It was 5:30 a.m. when Takeo's alarm jolted him awake. The small apartment was quiet except for the gentle breathing of his 7-year-old daughter, Hannah, asleep in the room next door. He moved silently through their modest home, careful not to wake her as he prepared for another long day. The morning routine was precise: shower, shave, breakfast preparation, lunch packing. By 6:15, he gently woke Hannah with a soft touch on her shoulder. "Ohio, my little flower," he whispered, using the Japanese greeting his late wife had always used. "Time to rise." Hannah stirred, her eyes fluttering open with reluctance. "5 more minutes, Daddy." "Not today, sweetheart. Mrs. Rodriguez can only watch you until 6:45, remember? I need to drop you off before my early shift." The mention of his schedule was enough to get Hannah moving. She understood, even at her young age, that their life operated on a delicate balance. Takeo had been both mother and father to her since his wife Yuki had passed away from cancer 3 years ago. They had moved from Tokyo to America shortly after, using the last of their savings to start fresh, away from the memories that haunted every corner of their old home. By 6:30, they were out the door. Takeo dropped Hannah at their neighbor's apartment with a kiss on the forehead and a promise to pick her up right after his shift ended. Then he hurried to catch the bus that would take him to Pinnacle Enterprises, where he had worked as a janitor for the past 2 years. Pinnacle was a rising tech company, known for its innovative software solutions and cutthroat corporate culture. The CEO, Richard Harrington, had built the company from the ground up with a philosophy that valued results above all else, including people. The employees worked long hours in the gleaming glass tower, creating products that were changing the digital landscape, while Takeo and the other maintenance staff moved invisibly among them, cleaning up their messes. Takeo didn't mind the invisibility. In fact, he preferred it. Before Yuki's illness, he had been a respected software engineer at one of Tokyo's leading tech firms. But grief, medical bills, and the need to care for Hannah had forced him to take whatever work he could find in their new country. His engineering degree and decade of experience meant nothing without proper work authorization and references in America. So he cleaned floors, emptied trash cans, and fixed whatever needed fixing, all while saving every penny he could for Hannah's future. The morning passed as it always did, methodical cleaning of offices, bathrooms, and common areas. Takeo worked efficiently, his mind often wandering to complex algorithms and coding solutions as his hands performed the repetitive tasks. Sometimes, when no one was looking, he would pause by an employee's computer and scan their code, mentally correcting errors or thinking of optimizations. It was a small indulgence, a connection to his former life. Around noon, as Takeo was replacing trash bags in the executive floor, he overheard a heated discussion from the main conference room. The door was slightly ajar, and voices carried clearly into the hallway. "The platform launch is in 3 weeks, and the core functionality is still failing under load testing," said a woman's voice, tense with stress. "We need more time. Time is money, Sarah, and we've promised our investors a Q3 launch." This voice belonged to Richard Harrington, the CEO. "Make it work." "But sir, the architecture has fundamental flaws. We need to rebuild the—" "I don't want excuses. I want solutions. That's what I pay you people for." Takeo paused, his hand hovering over a trash can. He recognized the problem they were describing. It was a classic scaling issue, one he had solved multiple times in his previous career. The solution wasn't complicated, but it required a specific approach that many Western-trained engineers overlooked. He continued his work, trying to ignore the conversation, but the desperation in the woman's voice tugged at him. The meeting ended with no resolution, just a deadline reiteration and thinly veiled threats about job security. As the executives filed out, Takeo kept his head down, pushing his cart past the conference room. Later that afternoon, as he cleaned the office of Sarah Chen, the lead developer he had overheard earlier, Takeo noticed her whiteboard covered with diagrams and code snippets. She was attempting to solve the very problem discussed in the meeting, but her approach was missing a crucial element. Without thinking, he picked up a marker and made a small annotation in the corner of the board, a simple formula that would point her in the right direction without solving the problem for her. He left quickly, hoping she wouldn't notice the addition until after he was gone. It was a risk, but a calculated one. The annotation was subtle enough that she might assume she had written it herself during a moment of inspiration. The next day, there was a buzz of excitement on the development floor. Sarah had made a breakthrough, and the platform was suddenly performing at 3 times its previous capacity. Takeo smiled to himself as he mopped around animated engineers high-fiving each other. His small contribution had made a difference. Over the next 2 weeks, Takeo continued his invisible assistance. A diagram left on a desk here, a formula written on a post-it note there. Small breadcrumbs leading the team towards solutions they were struggling to find. He was careful, never doing too much, always making his additions look like they could have come from the team itself. The platform launch was approaching, and the mood at Pinnacle had shifted from panic to cautious optimism. The core issues were resolved, and testing was showing promising results. Takeo felt a satisfaction he hadn't experienced since his days as an engineer. He was making a difference, even if no one knew it was him. 3 days before the launch, Takeo was cleaning the executive bathroom when Richard Harrington entered, talking loudly on his phone. "Yes, we're back on track. The team finally pulled their heads out of their asses and fixed the issues." He paused, listening. "No, I had to light a fire under them. These tech types need pressure to perform." Takeo kept his head down, focusing on wiping the marble countertop. "The stock options? Don't worry about those. We'll restructure after the launch, dilute the engineering team's shares. They don't need to know that yet." Harrington laughed. "By the time they figure it out, we'll have our IPO money and they can take it or leave it." Takeo's hand tightened around his cleaning cloth. The engineers had been working 16-hour days, sacrificing time with their families, all for the promise of equity that would apparently be worth much less than they expected. It wasn't right. Harrington finished his call and washed his hands, not acknowledging Takeo's presence until he reached for a paper towel and found the dispenser empty. "Hey, you," he snapped his fingers. "Towels." Takeo nodded and quickly replaced the paper towels. "And make sure these bathrooms are spotless for the investor meeting tomorrow. We have Japanese executives coming in, and they notice everything." Harrington straightened his tie in the mirror. "Not that you'd understand. Just do your job." Takeo bowed slightly, the gesture automatic from his years in Japan. "Yes, sir." Harrington raised an eyebrow. At least you speak English. That's more than I can say for half the cleaning staff." Takeo said nothing, returning to his work. But inside, something shifted. The casual disrespect, the planned betrayal of the engineers who had saved the company's launch, the arrogance, it all crystallized into a decision. He would do one more thing before stepping back into invisibility. That night, after picking up Hana and helping her with homework, Takeo sat at their small kitchen table with his old laptop. It was outdated but functional, and more than adequate for what he needed to do. He wrote code for hours after Hana went to bed, creating a simple but elegant solution to a problem the Pinnacle team didn't even know they had yet, a security vulnerability that would become apparent only under the high traffic of a successful launch. The next morning, he arrived at work early and slipped a USB drive onto Sarah Chen's desk with a note, "Check load balancer security protocol before launch. A friend." The investor meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the main boardroom. Takeo was assigned to make sure the room was immaculate and refreshments were prepared. As he arranged water glasses and coffee cups, he overheard snippets of conversation from the executives gathering outside. The Japanese investors had arrived early and were being given a tour of the office. At precisely 1:55 p.m., Takeo was finishing up when Richard Harrington entered with 3 Japanese businessmen in impeccable suits. They were speaking English, with one of the Japanese executives serving as translator for the others. "And this is our main conference room, where we'll be discussing the details of our platform launch and IPO strategy," Harrington was saying. "If you'll just give us a moment to," he stopped when he saw Takeo. "We need the room now. You can finish cleaning later." Takeo nodded and began gathering his supplies. "Hurry up," Harrington said impatiently. "We have important matters to discuss." One of the Japanese executives, an older man with silver hair and a dignified bearing, watched Takeo with interest. He said something in Japanese to his translator, who looked surprised but nodded. "Nakamura-san asks if you employ many Japanese staff," the translator said to Harrington. Harrington looked confused. "Japanese? No, just Americans." "Well, and the usual cleaning crew." "Mexicans, I think." "Maybe this one's Japanese, I wouldn't know." He gestured dismissively at Takeo. The silver-haired executive, Nakamura, frowned slightly at the translation. He spoke again in Japanese, more firmly this time. "Nakamura-san says in Japan, all workers are treated with respect, regardless of their position," the translator said, looking uncomfortable. Harrington forced a laugh. Of course. We value all our employees. But janitors don't really speak at these meetings, you understand. Different roles." As Takeo was about to leave, Sarah Chen burst into the room, her face flushed with excitement and concern. Mr. Harrington, I need to speak with you immediately. We've discovered a critical security vulnerability in the platform. If we had launched without fixing it, we could have exposed all our users' data to hackers. Harrington's smile became strained. Can this wait, Sarah? We're about to start our meeting. No, sir, it can't. But the good news is, someone left us the solution. She held up the USB drive. The code is brilliant. It's not just a patch, it's an elegant redesign of our entire security protocol. Whoever wrote this is a genius. The Japanese executives were watching with interest as the translator quietly explained what was happening. Fine, Harrington said through gritted teeth. Who wrote it? Johnson? Patel? That's just it, Sarah said. No one on our team claims credit. The note was signed, a friend. At that moment, the silver-haired Nakamura noticed Takeo still standing by the door with his cleaning cart. He studied him for a moment, then spoke directly to him in Japanese. Are you Japanese? Without thinking, Takeo responded in his native tongue. Yes, Nakamura-san. I'm from Tokyo. The room fell silent. Harrington looked between Takeo and the Japanese executive, confusion evident on his face. You speak Japanese? He finally asked Takeo. Before Takeo could respond, Nakamura continued in Japanese, his eyes sharp with interest. Are you an engineer? Takeo hesitated, then straightened his posture, setting aside the submissive stance he had adopted for the past 2 years. Yes, I was previously a software engineer in Tokyo. The translator began to relay this to Harrington, but Nakamura held up his hand, silencing him. He continued his conversation with Takeo in Japanese, asking about his background, experience, and how he came to be working as a janitor at Pinnacle. Takeo explained briefly about his wife's illness, their move to America, and his struggle to find work in his field without the right connections or updated credentials. As he spoke, he saw recognition dawn in Nakamura's eyes. Nakamura-san, are you Kenichi Nakamura of Nakamura Technologies? Takeo asked, suddenly realizing why the man seemed familiar. Nakamura nodded, a small smile forming on his lips. Yes. And you worked at Nakamura Technologies? Yes, for 7 years. I was the lead on the cloud security team. Nakamura's eyes widened with recognition. Takeo Nakamura? You were one of our best engineers. The room had grown increasingly tense during this exchange. Harrington looked between the two Japanese men, frustration evident on his face. What's going on here? What are you talking about? He demanded. Nakamura turned to his translator and spoke rapidly in Japanese. The translator listened, then addressed Harrington. Nakamura-san says this man was once a senior engineer at Nakamura Technologies, one of Japan's leading tech firms. He led their cloud security division and was highly respected in the industry. Harrington's face paled. That's impossible. He's a janitor. A janitor who just saved your company from a catastrophic security breach, Sarah interjected, holding up the USB drive. I'd bet anything he wrote this code. All eyes turned to Takeo, who stood tall now, no longer the invisible maintenance worker. Did you write this? Sarah asked him directly. Takeo nodded. Yes. I noticed the vulnerability while cleaning around the developers' desks. Your team was so focused on the scaling issue that they missed the security implications. And the scaling solutions? Sarah pressed. The annotations on my whiteboard? The formulas? Also me, Takeo admitted. I apologize for the intrusion, but I couldn't stand by and watch the project fail when I knew how to help. Harrington's face had turned from pale to red. You had no right to interfere with company property or projects. That's grounds for immediate termination. I believe that would be a mistake, Nakamura said in perfect English, surprising everyone in the room. Mr. Nakamura here has demonstrated exceptional skill and integrity. In fact, I'm more interested in investing in Pinnacle now that I know such talent is here, even if you failed to recognize it. He turned to Takeo and bowed slightly. Nakamura-san, I would be honored if you would join our meeting, not as a janitor, but as the technical expert you are. The other Japanese executives nodded in agreement, clearly impressed by the turn of events. Harrington looked like he might explode, but the presence of the investors forced him to maintain composure. Of course, he said stiffly. Mr. Nakamura, please, join us. What followed was one of the most unusual investor meetings in Pinnacle's history. Takeo, still in his janitor's uniform, sat at the boardroom table and explained the technical aspects of the platform with a clarity and depth that impressed everyone present. The Japanese investors asked pointed questions, which Takeo answered with confidence and expertise. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that Nakamura was only interested in investing if Takeo was given a proper position within the company. Harrington, trapped by his own ambition and the prospect of losing the investment, agreed to create a new role for Takeo as chief security architect. As the meeting concluded and people began to file out, Nakamura held back to speak privately with Takeo. "Why did you not seek out Japanese companies when you came to America?" he asked. "With your reputation, many would have hired you." Takeo's expression softened. "After Yuki died, I needed a complete change. And Hana, my daughter, she was already struggling with losing her mother. I didn't want to surround her with reminders of what she had lost.